I'm really thankful that you could join us in the month of October. I would like to just welcome you to the Amplified Voices Podcast Corner. We're just going to have a little conversation with you. We really do enjoy your work. You see that you've done multiple radio interviews as well as you've been on TV. One of our other colleagues will be joining us soon, Thelma, who's part of the project's team. So yes, Sli, just tell us briefly about yourself. Who is Slindile Mbatha besides just the clinical psychologist, and what are some of your focus areas?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Right. So what can I say? I'll maybe start off with the professional stuff that I do. I am a clinical psychologist. I mean, I work very, very broadly, but my main areas of focus are in mood disorders, depression, bipolar mood disorder, anxiety, as well as trauma. So those are the areas that I mainly do focus on, but I do work quite broadly with a whole range of different mental illnesses. I mean, I also do grief support, and I work with teenagers as well in schools, around identity development and kind of social integration, that kind of thing. So I, as a person, not in a not so professional sense, I am a young woman from KZN. I was born in a very small town called Howick, which is sort of like, it has this nickname about being a retirement sort of village. It's very sleepy, apparently, but it's a beautiful, beautiful little town in the Midlands in KZN. And so, I was raised in that very sort of lush, quiet farm environment. And I think it was a great place to kind of, grow up and be this very inquisitive sort of person. I think that's how I ended up doing this job. It's sort of, I found the job, but the job found me too. But it was just a lovely place to be. And I enjoy a whole range of things. I'm actually quite an adrenaline junkie sort of person. Perfect. So I love all the, the zip lining, that kind of thing. So I like the beach very, very much. And I just generally, I like to do a lot of relaxing whenever it is that I can. So I'm that sort of person. Most of the time, if you're looking for me, you'll find me somewhere in the sun doing something relaxing or something very thrilling.
Okay, wow. Interesting story. I'm also from Howard.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing. You hardly ever meet people from Howick somewhere else in the country.
You don't. I actually moved about a year or two ago. I moved to actually Pietermaritzburg. That's very interesting. Yeah. So anything that specifically sparked your interest in the field of clinical psychology? There are such various different types of psychology, your counseling, your educational. So being from a small town, what specifically just sparked your interest in the field of psychology?
I think maybe in the small town, I wasn't so exposed, I think, to any kind of mental health stuff at that time. I think the interest came more when I was leaving school, and I actually was at varsity, and I was very, very interested in philosophy always. I mean, it's just the ideas about just thinking very differently about the world and about people. So that for me was something that it just really resonated with me. Maybe the aspect of being from a small town was that you get to kind of build very close relationships with people. And I think it's something to me that was always very meaningful, and I was always curious about is relationships, why some relationships turn out the way that they do, why some people are the way that they are, and how people can grow up in the same family and turn out so different as well. So I think it was just this curiosity I had about people that eventually led me into wanting to do psychology. And then the more that I found out all the different areas of psychology, I think the clinical aspect, it's one of, people who struggle with a lot of mental health issues that, have to be diagnosed and treated. Clinically, there's always so much stigma around that too. So I think for me, it was very important to be doing work in an area where I can be just understanding people who are very, very different, who might be marginalized and very misunderstood. So I think it was always that thing about, for me, the relationship aspect, who we are as people, and I think understanding too, and being able to get involved with people who might otherwise be marginalized or misunderstood.
That's very interesting because I also know coming from the States how like it's very rare that you get to even see a psychologist. It's something we don't get to see. I just would like to know like just a brief definition for you because I know many people don't understand that there is a difference between your mental health, mental illness, as well as your mental well-being. If you could just give us just a brief definition of each.
So I think, mental health really relates to your overall state of well-being when it comes to, mentally, when we talk about things that have to do with mental stuff, it's mental functioning that really has to do with what is happening in your thought life, what is happening with your attention, your concentration, your psychological well-being, your stress levels. So I think mental health has to do with, it's this overall wellness when it comes to how you're doing just overall psychologically. And I would say emotionally, the emotional component too as a part of that. Mental illness, I would say there is an impediment to your overall mental health. So if there is any kind of stressor, I would say, or anything that is a disturbance to how you normally function in your mental well-being. So something that would either disturb your social functioning, you're not able to engage with friends and family the way that you normally do, something that might disturb your occupational functioning. If you're a student, it affects your ability to be able to complete your assignments, for example. If you are working, it's all the mental challenges you might experience that affect your ability to complete your tasks at work and actually work optimally. So anything that has to do with your mental functioning, your emotional functioning, that is an impediment to that, and actually so clinically, it so significantly affects you that it disturbs an important aspect of your life. So, sometimes we all get stressed to a certain extent, but it might not necessarily get in the way of you being able to do certain tasks. So that's really when I think getting the help especially is so important, is when you can see that, look, it's getting in the way of me being able to do things that I actually should be able. And then what was the third one that you asked me about?
It was mental health, mental illness, as well as your mental well-being.
Okay, so mental well-being, I would say it can be all the things that you are doing in an effort to kind of maintain your mental health. So it can be a lot of activities that you do, to help with that. It can be like if you're reading, whether you meditate, whether you hang out with your friends. But I would say it's more orientated around certain activities or behaviors that you can do in order to maintain a balance with your thoughts and your emotions and how you're relating to people around you.
Oh, okay. Thanks for that, because I feel like not many people really understand what mental health is. Therefore, they don't really see a need for them to seek mental assistance in terms of seeing a psychologist or a therapist. So yeah, just to go back to your focus areas, I heard that you said you focus on mood disorders. What are the common disorders that you see on your patients have on a daily basis, and what are some of the common symptoms, just for anyone that's listening that might know someone or them personally or just going through some stuff, but they don't really know how to put a name to it, should I say?
All right. So I see quite a lot of depression on a daily basis, and depression has so many different levels of severity. It can present with something else as well. But that's something that I see almost every single day. And it presents so differently also from person to person. And I also see a lot of anxiety too. And the funny thing is, depression and anxiety tend to go hand in hand. It can either be that maybe it's mainly someone who's extremely anxious and then they've developed some depressive symptoms, or vice versa, or it can both really kind of be fully fledged at the same time. And then with the symptoms, especially with depression. So one of the things with depression is I think typically when people think about that, it's, they have this picture of a person who's just so sad and, not really doing much with their life. There's this idea that I think we can have of what a depressed person is supposed to look like. And that's something I think that also needs to really, really change, because there are people who can meet the criteria for a depressive disorder and actually not present in that way. So there are people who can be diagnosed with depression, but they are going to work every day. They are maybe even seemingly to their friends, they seemingly actually quite bubbly, happy looking person. But some people present with depression and their main thing isn't actually that they feel terribly sad all the time. So the other symptoms of it that one can see is that, the low mood can be one of the main symptoms, but really lacking motivation to be able to do things that one normally would have enjoyed doing. Withdrawing maybe from friends and family and just feeling like you want to spend more and more time on your own. And then also the cognitive stuff, the lack of attention and concentration. Some people talk about just feeling forgetful of things, but that cognitive stuff tends to kind of worsen over time. And you can feel like, you read something and you've completely forgotten, or you were supposed to do certain tasks and you won't remember what it is that you were supposed to do come the end of the day. So that kind of thing, and sometimes not being able to sit down and fully engage and feeling like you get tired very, very easily if you're trying to actually work or complete tasks, mental tasks. So that's also a component of the depressive symptoms. You also do see quite a lot of changes in appetite. So one can have either not much of an appetite or you eat a lot more than usual. And that can also lead to changes in weight as well. So if there's notable changes in weight, so a person might not notice their mood first, but they might actually notice that they've either lost weight or gained weight in a sort of short period of time. It's a significant change in their weight. Yeah. And so the other thing to look out for as well is disturbances in sleep. So some people sleep a lot as a result, a lot more than usual. And it doesn't feel like a restful sleep either. You just feel like you can, if you wake up after 12 hours of sleep, you can just continue sleeping. Yeah. For some people, they'll come in to see me and they actually have noticed all the physical things and they're not necessarily noticing that, hey, there's a mood thing that goes with this too. And then I think just the other important thing, of course, that it's the more well-known thing about depression. Sometimes people do have some suicidal ideation. It might not just be thoughts of like, necessarily wanting to take one's life, but sometimes it's more subtle. It feels like just thoughts of wanting to disappear or not exist. There might not be a plan, but when one starts to entertain those thoughts more and more, it could actually be an indication that they might be suffering from depression or having depressive symptoms. The anxiety, somewhat similar with some physical changes, disturbances in sleep too, but there's a lot of physical symptoms with anxiety that one would notice, and especially it would be heart palpitations, chest pains, shortness of breath. Anxiety feels a lot more that there's a physical component to it, but it's also just feeling restless and like your mind is never at rest. There's always some kind of noise and you can think obsessively about things or worry all the time about things and not being able to get that worry under control. So anxiety looks a lot more like that. It looks a lot more like a busyness in the mind or an excessive worry. Whereas depression can almost feel a little bit like a slowing down that's happening.
So it really is just all the little things that we push aside, should I say, that we don't, and then it just keeps building up and just building up. Absolutely.
And I think this is the thing is most of the time, people notice it when it actually has been going on for some time. So you notice it because, I feel like I might be having a bit of memory issues. But by the time I see people, usually it's months of that. For some people, it's even years.
It's a very deep thing. And I just also think like as South Africans and being in South Africa, we are such a diverse country, so many different belief systems. Do you think that as South Africans, we have come to a point where we can say that we are accommodating mental health as well as we are able to accommodate the various belief systems, various religions, various races? Do you just think that as South Africa, we've reached a point where we can say, we are comfortable speaking about this. We are comfortable getting people assistance, and it's not such a taboo thing to speak about.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think there's definitely a move towards being more accepting of seeking help for mental health related issues, even for relationship related issues, which does affect one's mental health. So things in the family, that might have happened that might have caused some kind of emotional disturbance or trauma. I think people are much more willing to talk about this with their health practitioners. They're much more open to their doctors to say, I'm really, really stressed or I'm not okay. And I've seen, I would say, a great deal more willingness for people to come forward to say, look, my doctor actually advised me that I need to take care of myself psychologically, whereas it might not be something that they would have been open to before. So I think there's definitely a move towards that, towards being more accepting of seeking help. And also, I've seen this with different genders too, that across the board, it looks like more and more people are being switched on to that. But I think also because we're a multicultural society, people are not just thinking in the sense of problems to just say, oh, this is a cultural thing. Yes, some things I would say it's sort of culture bound. Some things are spiritual issues. But I think I've seen more and more clients, more and more people starting to think holistically about their health, to say, okay, some things are physical, some things are spiritual, some things are mental. We need to be able to address things on all of those levels.
Yeah, no, that is very true. I heard you saying that people feel more trusting with just speaking to their doctor. Being a psychologist, it seems like it's a very tough and heavy career, dealing with so many different personalities. How do you build your trust with your clients to just ease them and then get them to just speak to you freely without them feeling like they're forced to?
So, the one very important thing that we all do in the beginning is to kind of establish the basic rules, for anyone coming in to a therapy session. I explain sort of exactly what it entails. I would talk about the importance of confidentiality, of course, and that I'm bound, by confidentiality. So everything that we speak about stays in the room with myself and my clients. And then I also do explain to the clients that sometimes there are instances when that confidentiality has to be broken. But if that circumstance should happen, I say under what circumstances that would be, if you are in danger, and we might have to make a plan for that, if you might be of danger to yourself or you might be harmed by somebody else. And I also do let them know that if that is going to happen, we will always speak about it first. I will never call a family member. I will never sort of call a next of kin without speaking to my clients first if I'm concerned about them or I think that they might need extra assistance. So the first thing that, a psychologist should do, and that I do myself, is I establish those kind of baseline rules so the person knows exactly how this system works. And then I do kind of explain that I will be, asking maybe quite a few questions. Some of them might feel very unnecessary. Some might feel, way too personal. But it is important that I do ask those things, because the more information I have, then I can be perhaps more helpful. But I think I do also let people know that, look, there are some things, if you're not prepared to speak about it, it's okay if it feels like it's not something you want to address yet, or you're not able to speak about it. We can sort of move into it just slowly over time. So I don't think anyone should be afraid that they would be forced in a therapeutic process to say things that they don't want to say. It's very much going to work at the pace, at which you are ready. Yeah. So this is how I establish the trust with my clients. And I take a bit of time to get to know them a little bit better. And I think also I allow them to know a little bit about me too, so that they know that they can trust me. They can inquire if they would like to ask questions of me as well. And they know that I'm an open book.
I think that those statements that you made are so important. And I think they really are going to assist someone out there that is really not feeling themselves, but because of the way they probably heard from someone else that if you see a psychologist, you have to speak and they're just going to gun you down. And so, I really hope that the information that you're giving us today is really going to assist someone out there. Maybe if it's a family member. So just to touch down on a little bit of the COVID pandemic though. I feel like during the peak pandemic of it, as well as with the lockdown, we started to see on social media many people posting about mental health, because now it's like everyone is a mental health advocate, something that we're seeing more and more often. So how would you think that this whole COVID-19 pandemic just shifted everyone, and now everyone, they think they know what mental health is? So how do you think it just shifted everything as you as a qualified psychologist, and then seeing someone just keep on posting things about, mental health and being this mental health experts? Because I see on social media, I see lots of people posting things about mental health. So as you as a professional, how do you think COVID-19 just shifted? Did it make people get in touch with their mental health a bit more?
I think what COVID really did is, because so many of the normal ways of functioning were taken away, it really compelled us to focus and hone in on ourselves and our lives very intimately on what is actually going on. If I can't go out and have a good time with my friends, I'm left alone with my work, and then I'm left alone with my thoughts. What is going on in there? So I do think that it got a lot more people actually thinking about their day-to-day. I mean, it was exposing a lot of things about what is actually and sometimes underlying in families. So I think it was a huge shift for so many people. And also it was a great deal of stress that everybody was under, because we were facing all these questions about our mortality, especially those of us who got to see friends and family being ill. So the significance of those relationships too was something that was hitting home for a lot of us. And so I think more than ever, people started to really think very, very much about what is going on in my mind. What am I feeling? And those are the reflections that they were sharing more and more, and realizing that other people are talking a lot more about their feelings and their mental state and the importance actually of that aspect of ourselves as human beings. So I think it is a good thing in one way that, a lot of people started advocating for being aware of what is going on mentally and with your mental health. But I do also think, to some extent for other people, there was a lot of self-diagnosing, and almost like some people would take on the role of being experts of mental health, which is, I think there's a bit of a slippery slope on its own. So I think on one hand, it was really great to see that there was a general awareness that, yes, we are not just physical beings, that we just take care of ourselves physically, but we need to take care of ourselves mentally. But I do think on the other hand, there is still, we need to acknowledge the important role of experts, of professionals, and that they still do play a very, very important role on providing accurate information, and not just, anecdotes on, oh, this is what I'm experiencing. But it's always important to be checking that information with professionals and seeing, okay, what do experts actually say about that?
Yeah, that is really true. So do you just think that social media tends to have a huge impact on our mental health? I mean, I'd go onto my phone if I'm having a bad day and I'd see someone that's probably doing really well for themselves, and maybe I've just been feeling really down, and it kind of also just makes you doubt yourself a lot. Because people I know for me, I use social media as a coping mechanism. If you're stressed out, you'll watch a video. So do you think that is a healthy way of coping with things? What are some of the healthy ways of coping with things that you would suggest to someone?
I think, look, social media, I think it can be very, very harmful. We know that. So there's a lot of different ways of looking at social media. But the one thing that has come out in psychological research is we know that it can be incredibly harmful for certain people. If you are highly anxious, being on social media is not a good idea. And what we also do know is that people who spend more time engaging in social media tend to have higher levels of anxiety. They might be more vulnerable to actually being diagnosed with a mood disorder. So we know, especially for vulnerable groups, that, social media is not the best way of coping or engaging. So for the younger people, especially teenagers, social media, I think it's something that should be monitored and regulated, how much time they spend on it, because it's responsible for a huge amount. It accounts for a huge amount of mental health issues that we see with teenagers. And let's not forget that bullying also happens on social media platforms. So that's one of the downsides, is that definitely if you have children or there are younger family members that are responsible for, it's very, very important to be thinking about how much they are engaging with social media. So that's for one. And then also, if you know you are vulnerable already, if maybe you do have a diagnosis of some sort, you already know you are diagnosed, just moderate how much time you are spending on social media. And I mean, if also you're the average person and you don't necessarily have a mental illness or you don't necessarily have a diagnosis, but you can engage in social media now and then to sort of relax, or it's fun, or there's a trend going on, it's fine. It's not as if it's completely damaging. But I think the most important thing always is to moderate how much time you're actually spending on social media platforms. And not only that, but to have times when you actually switch off completely from it and you don't spend time on social media at all. So make sure that there's times in your day that the alerts are not coming through, or even in your week, Personally, I've deleted all social media for a couple of years now. I'm on Instagram, for my work. But as far as the Twitters and Facebooks, I became very, very anxious too, engaging on those platforms. And so sometimes to see how discussions go, you can get very emotionally involved. Or even if there's a trend or, sometimes it's helpful when for example, if there's an awareness about whatever it is, these campaigns, it's really, really nice if you can become part of that. But other times it can be very distressing, especially when you're constantly exposed to traumatizing things. So it's very important to just know yourself, how you respond to things. If you find that it's anxiety provoking for you, cut down that time. If you know that it makes you feel envious of other people's lives and you start feeling horrible about yours, limit the time that you spend on it, or it might just be time to kind of make sure you do have times that you are not connected at all.
And I think in the space that we are in, it's so important to just be in touch with yourself as an individual, with blocking out the noise of the social media and friends. So for someone that has a loved one that is probably suffering from depression or has anxiety, as coming from a family where I've had people who have had depression and you just don't know as the other person how to support them, you don't want to come on too strong to them, like telling them, you need to see someone. So how can you just advise some of our listeners that have someone at home that is sitting there that is depressed without coming on too strong?
Yeah, this is one of the difficult things I would say, because it's one of the things is to think about how would you want to receive that message. If it was you and you were not okay and somebody was trying to tell you, how would you want to hear it? So if somebody had come up to you and they said, you are clearly not fine, and I don't know why you're sitting around here sort of, wasting your life or whatever, you need to be quite sensitive in how you deliver the message. So you can convey your concern in a caring way if you're able to, in a gentle way, to sort of say, you can ask the person, first of all, if they're all right. You can ask to speak to them, maybe to sort of, let's say, if you can just have a moment almost to impress on them that this is something important you want to speak about. Can I ask you something? Are you okay? And then the person might be like, they might say that they're fine and say, okay, well, it's just, I maybe just noticed that you've been a little bit tired lately, or I was just wondering if you're fine. I was just wondering if things are all right. Because, you might want to actually convey that you really do care about them and you just want to make sure that they are fine. So sometimes if there are things that you do explicitly notice, for example, that a person's like their eating habits have changed or they're spending a lot of time sleeping, maybe you can encourage them to go to a doctor initially, because you might not know actually what it is that if it is a mental health related issue. So one might just encourage them to see a doctor just to make sure that they are fine, just to make sure that they're okay and nothing is wrong. And if that's clear, then that's fantastic. But you can always just make sure that you let people know that if they need anything, you are there for them. You're not going to judge them at all if they weren't okay. And if they didn't want to speak about it with you, it's also fine. They can speak with a professional about it if they wanted to do that as well. And there's no judgment for that too. So it's not an easy conversation to have, but I would say try and convey as much care as you possibly could and think about how you would want someone to speak to you if you were having a hard time. What is the message that you would want to hear?
So I think the delivery of your statements is the most important part. Do you have any closing statements that you'd like to make, just to our listeners? If there's someone out there that's just needing to just see someone, what kind of services do you offer? Are you online? Are you only face-to-face?
So I would say anyone who is, if you're even thinking about going to see a psychologist, please don't wait until you feel worse, to go and see somebody. Sometimes people are very reluctant to come through because they think, my problem is not that big. And maybe the only people that go and see psychologists are like people with very, very serious issues or heavy traumas, or, they've had a terrible childhood or terrible life. But it's not like that. And some people also think that, I must go there. It's only for crazy people. Or if I go there, I'm going to be diagnosed with something major. And that's not the case. You're not going to be diagnosed with something that you do not have. And even if you were to be diagnosed with something, it's very important to be able to ask your doctor, ask whoever your health practitioners are, what does this mean? And, how did you arrive at that diagnosis? So engage with them about it. You're allowed to ask those questions. So I would just encourage everyone that you don't actually have to wait until you feel like you have a very, very serious issue if you wanted to go and see a psychologist. Also, if you just feel like you need someone to talk to because you're going through a really hard time, you don't know how to think about certain things, go for it. You don't need to go in because something extremely hectic is happening in your life. So you don't need a major justification. You can just go there because you really just need to have someone help you through something that you're thinking about in your life. So that's for one. And I think also there's a lot of different services that are out there, not just from myself, but from many psychologists. There's a lot of psychologists with many different backgrounds, different ages that are offering services online, in person. I myself am offering sessions online and in person as well. And so, if anyone wants to come through for therapy or they want to make an appointment, they're more than welcome to do that. As I mentioned, I do have my Instagram work account, which is at slindile.psychologist. And that's where people can find me on social media if they are looking for me. But otherwise, they can then contact me through Crescent Clinic in Cape Town if they would like to make an appointment, or else they can find me at slindile.psychologist@gmail.com.
Thank you so much, Slee. I feel as if this session was so informative. And on behalf of African Female Voices, we are so thankful for having people like you out there to just keep on assisting people and just creating awareness around mental health, because we do know that if you're not okay mentally, it affects you physically, it affects you emotionally, it just affects you all around. So we are thankful for having you here today to just shed some light on the topic. So we are very thankful for you taking time on a Saturday, especially just to be here with us.
Oh, it is my pleasure, Jasmine. And I hope that anyone who's listening has learned something and that you would continue to learn. But as I said, it's very, very important to also make sure that you, with whatever it is that you are absorbing, you've got professionals who are on board in that. So if it's books you're reading, make sure that you're also reading books, written by people who are in the field. If you're following social media accounts, it's fantastic. Make sure that you get some people who are also experts in their field that you follow and can get accurate information from.